Part 4, Chapter 12, Inside the Whale. One runs the risk of weeping a little if one lets oneself create a bond with another. When we approached the village, Pablo's eyes flickered open. Maybe his sleeping body sensed the curves of a familiar road. We passed rolling mountains spotted with low trees and cacti and cornfields, a river snaking through a valley, a ribbon of dense green, scattered outcrops of rock, sudden cliffs, dried gulches, the sky huge and dusty blue, only a few far-off clouds. Pablo pointed out landmarks, his Spanish fast and eager. Mira, those trees there, that's where my mom said the forest duendes live. Duendes? I asked. Like little people, spirit people. No one can cut the trees there. If they do, the duendes will make them crazy. And below that cliff, that's where the bandolera lives. Who's that? A senora who steals bad kids. She has turkey claws for feet, and La Garona lives in that river. She cries and cries because she misses her children. Mi hijos, she calls, mi hijos. And her children miss her too, but they can't find her because she's dead. I glanced around to see if anyone reacted to the dead mother part. No one did, as if there was a silent agreement to say no more about Angel's mother, to let it slip out the window into the breeze. The village itself seemed deserted. It even smelled deserted, like old dried wood, sun-baked stones of crumbling houses, lingering wood smoke. A few children eyed our van curiously and ran inside to their mothers, who showed up at the doorway and watched us go by. We swerved out of the way of a woman leading a burro packed with firewood, past shacks of chipping pink and blue cement, a church with fresh white and red paint, an empty basketball court. Beyond the buildings, fields of young corn and beans made a patchwork over the hills. Mi escuela! Pablo cried, pointing at a one-story building painted with white kids playing in a field of flowers. I remember my first day at school. I didn't want to let go of my mom's hand, and then she left, and I cried and cried. We went around a curve, and Pablo shouted, "Stop!" and pointed out the window to something on the roadside at the edge of a cornfield. It looked like a heap of filthy clothes. At closer look, it was a very, very old woman lying on her back on the ground. "My God!" Dika cried. "This lady, she is dead!" Mr. Lorenzo screeched the van to a stop, and we all jumped out and ran to the body. I tried to remember CPR from health class. Was it 2 breaths, then 10 pushes on the chest, or the other way around? Pablo looked thrilled. "Nola!" He crouched down, put his hands over her eyes, and said, "Adivina, guess." "Pablito?" she creaked. And he took his hands away and grinned. She laughed, an ancient, toothless laugh, and ran her hands over his face, and then over her own face, and then spoke to him in a language I didn't recognize. "Is she okay?" I asked. He answered in Spanish. "Oh, she always does this. She's Nola, my great-great-grandmother, and sometimes she feels like lying down, and so she lies down. But now she doesn't do it in the middle of the road anymore because my mom made her promise to go to the side of the road." I would like to be able to lie down whenever I felt like it, I thought. When life seemed too hard, to just drop out for a little while. Mr. Lorenzo helped her up, and she looked at each of us one by one. Angel held out his hand to her, and she laughed as though it was a big novelty and touched her hand to his. She turned to me last and stared hard. Her lips curled over her gums matter-of-factly. Age spots speckled her face, a shade darker than the brown. Her skin was wrinkled like a berry dried in 100 years of sun. She wore layers of mismatched clothes, a pink dress, blue checked apron, red cardigan, black shawl over her head, plastic beads and fake pearls and gold chains, saints and virgins and crosses dangling. Cataracts clouded her eyes, but that made her look at me all the more intensely. She touched my hand with her rough one. I wondered how it would feel to be so old, but not in a nursing home, just given free rein to wander. Buenas tardes, senora. I'm Sophie, and this is Angel. She nodded and laughed. Nola is 100 years old, Pablo said proudly. She only speaks Mixteco. That's what the old people speak. Angel and I put our hands at Nola's back and began walking. Pablo pointed down the road to a cluster of small houses around a patch of dried grass and dirt. They were shacks, really, some of wood and bamboo, some adobe, some cement. We walked, impossibly slow, while Dika and Mr. Lorenzo drove the 50 yards. In front of the houses, as though posed for a picture, was a horde of women and children. 2 round young women in aprons with shoulder-length hair, big cheeks, giant smiles. An older round woman in an apron, her long braids streaked with gray. 3 barefoot children around Pablo's age, staring open-mouthed. I slipped my hand into Pablo's possessively, but he pulled away and made a beeline for the older woman, his arms outstretched. Abuelita! My stomach sank. She picked him up, actually lifted him in the air. Maria Santísima Purísima, mijito! Her voice was deep and confident and came straight from her soul. With her hands, she made little crosses over his head, his neck, his chest, hugged him, kissed both his cheeks again and again. She was crying now, and he was laughing and hugging her tight. Ay, niño, how big you are, how big! After a while, she let him go, and the younger woman fawned over him. Ay, mijo, how handsome, how big! And that was when I noticed Angel next to the van, holding his box like a baby cradled in his arm. A tear slipped out beneath the sunglasses. I was almost sure of it. Then he wiped his cheek, and it was gone. I walked over to him, my arms swinging self-consciously, my hands noticeably empty. Angel spoke in a raw voice. If Pablo stayed in Tucson, he'd forget all this stuff, these people, the stories his mom told him, everything. And years later, if he came back here, maybe it would all come flooding back. And then how would he feel? But we can give him a better life in Tucson. Education and medical care, and notice how he started talking about his mom? I think she seems more real to him here. Everything here reminds him of her. Yeah, I admitted. I secretly hoped his relatives didn't love him very much, that they already had enough other kids around, that giving one away wouldn't matter. That's terrible, isn't it? It's not terrible. You love him. We moved closer to the group. The younger women turned shy suddenly and shook our hands softly, barely touching. Ceremoniously, the older woman said, "We thank you for caring for our boy. You have fed him well and given him much love, much cariño." Did this mean they wanted him back now? "Welcome to our humble home. It is not much, not what you are accustomed to in your country, but it is all we have, and now it is your house too. You are welcome here. Our house is your house." The other women piped in and repeated the speech like a song refrain. Pablo, meanwhile, had run over to 2 more children who had been hanging back behind a wooden shack. They were touching his shirt, his tennis shoes, his shorts, even his socks with a kind of odd reverence. He led the kids to the van and dug around for the books of stickers we'd brought as gifts, and they ran around sticking stickers everywhere. I wished he'd kept his hand in mine. Holding on to his hand gave me a purpose. The women ushered us into the cool, dark house and sat us on wooden chairs and served warm Coke in small glasses. Bits of shriveled corn cobs and straw poked out from the brown adobe walls. The floor was packed dirt, and the room empty of furniture except for the chairs, a homemade wooden table, and some crates piled in the corner. The woman Pablo had run to first, the one he called Abuelita, was his grandmother, the mother of his father. She was younger than I'd expected, her face firm and glowing. She had a heavy bosom that ran into her large belly, the buttons of her dress stretched to near bursting. She wore knee-high pull-ups pulled to the top of her calves, and when she sat down, I caught a glimpse of her round, dimpled knees. She adjusted a shawl around her shoulders. She was the leader and spoke in a rich, warm voice. I liked her. She was a good person. Buena gente. "Thank you for taking care of our Pablito," she said. "Thank you. You are a gift from God. He looks healthy, happy. You have cared for him well." Tika said in Spanish, "Pablo is a good boy, a very good boy." And she held forth a red tin of fruitcake. "For you." I didn't say anything about his sleeping with the chickens, or how he'd gone for days without talking, or how his first laugh had been less than 2 weeks ago. All I could get past the lump in my throat was, "We love him. Even our chickens adore him."